r/AskReddit by Reddit stories. If humans live to be 500 years old, what hobbies would you get around to getting good at? Bonsai. There should be a bonsai trading subreddit. I thought about that too, but I think the zen in bonsai is contributing to something that you won't see come to completion or fruition. Bonsai. I just came here to tell this. Bonsai is the hobby if you live 500 years. Any and every trade-based job, so therefore I don't have to spend a shit ton of money in order to maintain my home, vehicle, and just be able to rely on my own knowledge on being able to fix things, to be honest. The ultimate handyman. Yeah, I'd want to be like the dad in Swiss Family Robinson. Kids riding ostriches and shit, build a crazy ass tree mansion. Tons of people do this already. Assuming technology progresses at the same rate it is, this would be nearly impossible. You think, 100 years ago mechanics on cars were working with mildly advanced steam engines. Now they need to work on things so advanced they made the spaceships of the 60s and 70s look like scientific calculators. I'm already trying to do this honestly. Went to go get an oil change the other day. Firestone tells me my oil plug is too large, and if they pull it out, the oil pan might be stripped. I have no idea if they are lying or not. Wanted to charge me around $550 to replace it with a new oil pan. Fuck that, I'll pay $100 something for an oil pan and $70 at a do-it-yourself garage. I changed my alternator and starter by myself. Alternator was like a 10-minute job, starter was like 25 job because one of the bolts was crazy stuck on there. Learning languages and just expanding general knowledge. Also seeing more of the world. Collecting citizenships. Don't let a country tie you down. 50 years max. I agree. My answer to the what would your superpower be? Question is always hear a language once and instantly learn it. I dream about having enough time to learn to speak every language, even dead ones. Ah yes, the most powerful polyglot. Imagine trying to keep up with slang and other fast evolving aspects of language over 500 years. After learning a second language, I really regret not starting earlier because after 30, the process is just so much harder. For those of you who think language is just about communication, you're missing so much. Language teaches culture, different ways to look at the world, literally different ways of thinking. If a language has a simple word, it's used more. Even if it's a complicated topic, their children use these words more, society thinks in these words more. Language is not a Sunday newspaper crypto quip of jumbled English, no, it's intricately entwined with culture and tradition and thought. I am sad I don't have time to experience the nuances of more before my mind goes. Gardening would be very fun. It wouldn't be intimidating to start growing trees. Bonsai master. Don't be intimidated by growing a tree. The world needs more trees. I'm not saying plant an oak tree 3 feet from your house, that's going to be a headache in 30 years, but plant a tree. Plant 20 more than you want and chop the ones you don't want down and keep the best one. No need to be intimidated. It's amazing to watch a tree grow, and most trees don't need 500 years. Most trees' lifespans are only 100 to 200 years and many are shorter. On that time scale, gardening becomes terraforming. I'd make one of those Frankenstein trees where you graft all the other fruit tree branches on. A society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. Greek proverb. I remember in Skyrim when you go to Lord Harkon's castle to go to the soul dimension, forgot name, you pass by Serena's mother's garden. She says, you have any idea what a garden looks like after hundreds of years of being tended to by a master? The garden looked like shit though, but it had abounded for like 3,000 years, so person shrugging medium skin tone. Ah. You could finally plant trees that you yourself could rest under the of someday. People would be growing prize-winning sequoias. I think planting a tree that takes like 100 years to grow would be kinda cool to do if we live to be 500. I love this idea. I also want to learn gardening. A society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. Old Greek proverb. My 6-year-old wanted to plant some maple seeds we found, and I was like, sure, why the hell not? So we planted 6 seeds in a large planter, and I told her they would probably not grow, but we would try our best. 5 of them sprouted, and we live in an apartment, and please send help. This might be one of the few serious answers, but cooking. Even if some don't consider it a hobby, I would learn recipes from all around the world, so when someone is in the mood for something I can make the best possible version of that thing. When you get good at cooking, you don't just learn recipes. Over time, you adapt them and change them subtly to your own tastes. Eventually they become your own, and after 500 years, my God, you'd make some mouths water from the smell of your kitchen. Living for 500 YRS would make grandma recipes meaningless. It would actually make you look completely different at grandparents, as they would still be youngsters. Imagine how many grandparents one would have. I've been doing that during quarantine and it's great. I'm weird though. I can make these pretty difficult meals, but I can't fucking get cheese sauce right. Sad face. Look, if fucking cooking isn't a hobby, then what the actual fuck is? Fuck those people who say it isn't a hobby. These people ask you, so what are your hobbies? And if you don't respond with some utterly boring, prohibitively expensive middle-class form of exercise, e.g. bouldering, sailing, they'll start gatekeeping the definition of the word hobby. /rant. It's rewarding. I've spent the last 5 years learning to cook, and man, I don't care if you live only 80 years, it's completely worth taking the time to learn. I learned in phases, and everyone I know now knows me as a dude who can throw down some decent scratch. Completely worth the time to learn. This is completely opposite of what I do for work or have as any other hobby. I can make a decent dish from many different cultures at this point, and can make anything work in my kitchen with just a few ingredients. I'm comfortable with that. Totally underrated skill, even if you have a million cooking shows and pros around. One big thing that helped me get really into cooking was to try one new recipe per week for half a year. I have small kids, so we did Movie Mondays, where I had pre-chosen a movie, and based on that movie, usually of a major children's animated movie brand that also has their own streaming service, I'd cook a meal. I learned how to make Kenyan samosas while my kids watched Lion King, cottage pie while watching Brave, etc. It was an incredible experience for all of us and taught me new recipes and techniques. I have a huge issue with people who say they can't cook, because to me, they're just saying they are horribly lazy. It's a bad excuse to get out of cooking. At its most basic level, cooking is just following instructions. If you can do that, you can cook. I had a friend whose wife used to claim she was so bad at cooking that she could burn water. Of course, when you set a pot of water to boil, go in the living room and take a nap, you are going to fuck something up. Give me a break. I could always cook, but because I had about 4 weeks of quarantine and I was bored out of my mind, I started looking at some recipes online and followed them exactly, step by step, and I was able to cook those dishes. After, I was able to take what I had learned from those recipes and use them in other aspects of my cooking. Cooking isn't about being able to craft meals like Gordon Ramsay, a lot of it is just common sense and patience. All I hear is someone saying, "John passed at the age of 110. And someone replying, "He was so young." This was kinda my train of thought. If we could live to be 500 years old, I'd imagine it'd be a much rarer feat than someone nowadays living to be 100. Considering how easily damaged and accident-prone we are. For having big brains, we really are a fantastically flawed machine. After reading this, I can't get the quote out of my head from the Sorcerer's Stone where Harry and Hermione are discussing immortality at the library. The only stone currently in existence belongs to Mr. Nicholas Flamel, the noted alchemist and opera lover. Mr. Flamel, who celebrated his 665th birthday last year, enjoys a quiet life in Devon with his wife, Pernelli. Not 110, but my country's life expectancy is ridiculous, and it's not uncommon to hear the phrase "she died in an accident at 81, she was so young, so sad," because people in my area nowadays, well, barring the corona BS, are expected to pass at least 90 plus. Obviously, with retired folks getting pensions at least, sometimes twice, as big as most salaries, and a 60% young unemployment rate, things are getting tricky to maintain, with grandparents being the primary source of income on many households. I mean, my still young 79 granny gets a monthly €2,100 paycheck, and I'm considered privileged by doing €1,200/m being exploited on a 200 hours/month position at 32. The world would be even more overpopulated. I'm already good at nothing but 500 years and I can perfect it. What's the difference between being good at doing nothing and being perfect at doing nothing? I would have given this an award, but since I'm poor, this is all I can bestow upon the first place medal. The aimless arrow never misses. I don't know, to be honest, but dating would be really weird. Met this gal last weekend, she's 412 years old. Oh dude, that's just wrong, you're only 112, how can you be with a chick that's 300 years older than you? You know the rule, dude, half your age plus 50. Let's say the average age these days is 100, even though it isn't. Your scenario would be the equivalent of a 20-year-old going out with an 80-year-old. The outrage people would have when they see a 450-yo man dating an 18-yo girl. I wonder if they'd be better at sex or finally get sick of it. What even kind of music does she listen to? Paganini? She was alive for the Enlightenment period, for God's sake. Man, that's just cradle of cradle robbing at this point. You can't let someone alive during the Industrial Revolution be tied down to such a cougar. Dude, we said French Revolution was the limit. We would act like 20-year-olds until we were 450 and then shove every last bit of live in the last little bit. So not much different, Imo. Was about to say procrastinating to the extreme, lol. For me, that would mean happily being a virgin and / or single for at least the first century, or two, of my life. Unfortunately, this is the real answer. The reason I don't take up hobbies isn't because of my lifespan, it's because I spend my days working, and my nights and weekends feeling tired and just wanting to relax and be with friends. Maybe it would be different if we had 48 hours in a day, and still only needed to work and sleep for 16 of those hours. We'd get really good at practicing safe sex for the sole sake of avoiding reproduction. As a matter of fact, there'd probably be a global restriction put in place only allowing people to reproduce once a century. Imagine seeing your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren when you're around 400 years old. A common trope in fantasy literature is that the longer a species lives or the more powerful it is, the somewhat proportionally lesser its fertility rate tends to be. So elves have children once every few centuries, whereas it could be considered a near miracle if a dragon manages to have more than one offspring throughout its life of many millennia. I would take a hell of a lot more care of my teeth, etc. If the past 2 months have taught me anything, I'll start a bunch and then abandon them. Though with 500 years maybe I'd pick a few back up. I've achieved the square root of fuck all with all this spare time. How much more time would we have to spend at school though, because we would age so much slower if we lived to 500. The key is really to say every day, or every other day, no need to push too hard, that you're setting aside 1 hour for this activity or being completely bored. Schedule it, stick to it. During that hour you either do the thing you want to improve at or work on, or you do nothing at all. All the better if you have 2 or 3 things you want to work on. I never finished that book. I wanted to try to learn trombone. My house is never clean, and during that hour you can either sit and do nothing or you can do one of those 3 things. Worst case scenario is you spend an hour disconnected from distractions and screen time and stress. And you accept that, don't get upset about it, you kept your promise. Best case scenario, you make progress on something. Other worst case scenario, you fall asleep. That's been one of my issues. Do we physically age the same, or is it spread out over time? In order for humans to live 500 years they would have to age slower, or else our immune system would be too weak to live that long. Right? Am I going to be a 50-year-old baby like Yoda? Spread out over time. Imagining teenage years lasting for 20 years or so. Yikes. For them and the people who would be around. Folding a fitted sheet. 500 years isn't long enough to master the art of fitted sheet folding. It's the rounded corners, they get you every time. This guy. I still don't think I could be bothered, honestly. Learned this from this YouTube video a few years back. It comes in surprisingly handy. By 100, virtuoso guitar. By 200, piano maestro. By 300, drums, baby. By 400, ace of base. By 500, harmonica blues master. Edit. Some futurists believe that the first person to live to the age of 150 is already alive right now, and the first person who will live to be 1000 years old will be born by 2040. Interesting side note. Now let the Redditing continue. As if humanity will make it past this year. I recently read an article that some believe we've reached a break-even point where every year that passes, our life expectancy is now increasing by more than 1 year. These futurists sound like the ones in the 60s that thought we'd have cities on Mars by the 90s. The idea that we can go from the current record of 116 years, verified, to 1000 by someone born in the next 20 years is insane. I don't know, but my Minecraft base finna be lit. There still won't be vertical slabs. I just realized that languages and their evolution is so fucking weird. Say that sentence to someone even 10 years ago and you'd confuse the fuck out of them. Bruh, your single player mineshaft would end up like 2B2T spawn. Lately I've been working on memorizing every country's name and location on the globe. If I had 500 years, I could try to memorize every city. I'd appreciate it if you liked and subscribed.